Hey there, Yuris here, and welcome to the Community ROI podcast. Here, senior community experts, founders, and C-level managers tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about how a community impacts business growth. By listening to these conversations, you'll get actionable steps on how to connect community goals with business goals to skyrocket business growth while still bringing extreme value to community members. And my guest is Jake Hurwitz, founder at Thursday Labs, a new type of content company or production studio that helps founders and investors become thought leaders by producing a ton of valuable content and generated tens of millions for companies like POSH, Day One, Rove, Nifty Bridge, and many others. So welcome, Jake.
Thanks for having me.
Finally, you're the first founder on this podcast. Usually I was talking to community experts, but let's turn the tables and let's start talking from the other side. And the moment that I saw your post on LinkedIn that said that head of community will become the most crucial hire for early stage startups in the next few years, I was like, oh my God, hallelujah, finally, people are talking about this. Yeah, people are talking about this, but like founders are talking about this, yay. So I immediately wanted to have the community ROI conversation with you. And tell me, how do you define a community?
So I have a very strict definition, and I think it requires us comparing community to audience. So an audience is where you are one person or one brand, let's call it metaphorically, standing on a stage, speaking to your audience, and all your audience is looking at you, like at a conference, or at a concert or anything. Like you're on a stage and everyone is looking at you and you're speaking to them, speaking at them, and they're listening to you. That's an audience. A community, on the other hand, is you're standing or sitting somewhere in the middle and there's a circle around you. That's your community of all these people around you in a circle. And they're looking at you, they're listening to you, but they're also engaging with each other. That's the difference. So if you've ever been to some event like a yoga class or a conference and you're sitting in the audience, they're like, turn to the person next to you and introduce yourself. I think that's like a very cheesy and minor attempt at building community. But that's it. It's community is where there is this person at the center that is, I would say, commanding the room, right? Like taking the responsibility of owning the attention, but also the people within it are nodes with each other, sharing things with each other, helping each other, connecting each other. That's how I define community.
Yeah, it's like one to many versus many to many. And I totally love that you are talking, that we started with this because I'm still talking to some people and they're like, oh, we have community. I'm like, okay, tell me more. And they're like, yeah, we have this newsletter, or, oh yeah, we have this Instagram page. And I was like, okay, but where is the community? So
Yeah.
I'm curious, what's the place of a community in the business structure of a company?
I think nowadays, and for anyone listening, it's 2024, September 2024. So nowadays means right now in September 2024. It's it's the heartbeat of a company. I've always been in the marketing branding side of things. And so I'm always going to romanticize and be a little idealistic and aspirational about companies because that's where the word brand comes in. But I don't think that you can have a competitive advantage anymore with your product. I don't think you can have a competitive advantage anymore with your service or your tech. Maybe you can with like your investors and how much money you have, but competitive advantage, I fundamentally believe that it now comes down to the team and the community behind it. And the team is a part of the community. They're the leaders of the community. It's the heartbeat of a brand now. And the reason I say that these other elements that have always been the competitive advantage, like, oh, we have this IP or we have this product or we have this capital, like you can build an app. A 9-year-old kid can build an app on ChatGPT in 10 minutes now. Like we saw a video the other day of some high school kid who basically reverse engineered Facebook. He reverse engineered all of Facebook in like 18 minutes on ChatGPT. This is a kid in his parents' basement. And I'm like, yeah, the days of like, oh, we built this tech, blah, 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 over. But community, you own it. There's so much to it. You own it. It's the lifeblood of your brand. It's everything.
Tell me more about why this community is a competitive advantage for businesses.
It's where loyalty lies. I think the best example of community, and disclaimer, I'm not a religious person, but the best example is church. Like
Yeah.
church has been around since the dawn of human history for the most part. If you're religious or not, I don't think you can disagree that it's the best form of community there is. You have people showing up literally religiously every week or every day, devoted to something bigger than themselves with others. They wear merch and swag representing that church. They marry people within the same church. They have children and bring them to that church. They live their entire lives around the values and culture and quote unquote guidelines of that community. And then they have their children do that as well, and they bring new members in, and that's what it is. The most loyal growth function comes from the community now. And like your LinkedIn group or your Facebook group, or the fact that like you send people a t-shirt when they onboard with the company, like those are all necessary components, but they're just the components. And you can't just call that a community and like check the box. It doesn't work that way. And it's honestly then a waste of money and time to go that direction. You need to like really cultivate and invest in it and understand the long-term nature of community.
And I know that it's really huge amount of investment, and it's also building communities comparing to building relationships. You know, you can't go just meet someone on the street like, hey, go marry me. Like, yeah, maybe it will work. I don't know, but most likely not. So it's always about, you know, having some conversations, going back in there, going a few days, and etc. etc. But and the fun thing that you told about church, it reminded me, I have another podcast called Community Life, where I talk to community experts about their life journey. And I just randomly chose the name Community Life. And then once I tried to find the podcast on Apple Podcast or somewhere, and I typed Community Life, oh my God, there are so many podcasts of churches. Like almost every church has Community Life podcast.
That's interesting. No, that's an incredible data point. But the problem is church is dying. At least in the US it is. Like post-COVID, and it's also a generational thing. Like I know very, very few people that go to church or even identify as religious. Granted, I live in like coastal cities. I've lived in New York and Los Angeles, and they're like typically not as traditional in their values in those cities. But people are like, humans are still craving what churches and other types of organizations like that have provided since the dawn of humankind. And they're turning to the internet for that. Like, look at the growth of yoga classes and run clubs and like all singles communities, and people are lonelier than ever. People are really craving quote unquote community in a lot of ways. We're seeing the decline of dating apps, which is pointing to then IRL experiences and people wanting to connect. We're seeing like backgammon clubs and game nights, and God, the list goes on of like basically all of this is just to replace church. It's just to replace church.
The fun thing that at some of communities that I was building, I know at least 2 stories of people who met there and they get married afterward. So yeah, it totally works. And I'm curious, tell me, why head of community will become the most crucial hire for early stage startups in the next few years?
I think that a lot of founders are waking up to realizing the importance of community and like everything we just said, but also realizing that they themselves are not the best at long-term community building. I think it's first important to identify like who is the type of human that makes for a good head of community, and then why that's so important. So think about that friend that you have. Like we all have this one friend or numerous friends, or at least know of somebody that they're always like trying to get people together. Whenever they're traveling, they're like, I'm going to be in whatever city, like who's around? You guys want to do dinner? Or like, I'm hosting this event and we're doing a run this morning and then we're going to play pickleball after. Or like, you know, I'm doing like a little coffee shop pop-up with this friend who just opened a coffee shop. So like come by from Sunday from 8 to 10. Like they just are obsessed with bringing humans together. They're super connectors. They often have spreadsheets of everyone they meet. They often write their own like algorithms or have little apps that they use that help them connect people. Or you meet that person out in public, 30 seconds into the conversation, like, oh my God, I know 3 people you have to meet. Those are great head of community type people. I know a couple of them that are really, really good. Probably 5 or 6 that I've ever met. So there's not that many of them. They are very important then because one, if you're a founder, like I cultivated my community in the beginning days, and the community gets big enough where it's like that's a full-time job. It has to be a full-time job, but I have to run this business. So once I, as the founder, and any founder kind of develops the like foundation and the brand pillars and like the initial ethos and kind of gets this thing from 0 to 1, some define that as product market fit. Maybe you can call it like community market fit or something like that. Like once you get to the point where the community is now like there's a flywheel spinning and it's got legs of its own, then it's a really good time to bring in a head of community who has that je ne sais quoi, that gift of gab. They have that ability to like network like that and super connect like that. Pay them a lot of money. Like this is in the US, 150K a year role at least. And that person is now full-time in charge of serving the community, introducing members to each other, implementing a referral program so that people have a very easy and incentivized way to bring new members in. An interview process if you want to make it a private community. Maybe there's a paywall for them to join. They run that. They design the merch. They host events. They're traveling. Maybe they have a team under them of like little ambassadors, or you have dinners happening in different cities if you're like a virtual community, etc. The list goes on. They're planning content. They're the one that's reporting to the marketing team on like, this is what we're hearing from our community a lot. Let's interview some members. Let's answer their questions and put that on TikTok and put it on LinkedIn. They're also informing the sales team at the company saying, this is what our community is struggling with. These are their hiccups. These are some common objections we're getting. If you're out selling to the future of this community, don't you think you want to know what the community is thinking? Like the sales teams, they're reporting back to the sales team. They're reporting to the CEO to give them metrics, to give them information on what's going on in the community so that they can then report that to the investors. Like it's really the glue in so many ways. So I'm hiring my own version of a head of community now. We're calling it a head of network. I understand this role, I think, pretty well and like what type of person is involved in it. And God, this is the most important hire I've ever had to make by far, because this is like everything I built so far. Now it's the first time I'm handing it off to the next person. It's almost like my successor in a sense. I need to really get to know this person and they need to really understand my vision as the CEO. Like this is my baby. This is my entire life. Like I take this shit super seriously with what we're building. The head of community, in our case, the head of network, is like the first in line now after me. Very important role.
Am I hearing it correctly that the head of community is kind of a bridge between clients and people who are interested in services and what your business is proposing, between them and the whole company, each and every team, each and every person in the team?
100%. I would think of them a little bit like the camp counselor or like the director. You have the founder, right, of the camp who's like running the company, but they're not, at some point, they're not like boots on the ground anymore. They're not the one interfacing with the people day to day anymore. At a restaurant, like the owner of the restaurant's not really there much. It's the waiters and waitresses that are interfacing with the patrons all day, every day. They're the ones who are on the ground. Like if you're ignoring what they're seeing and what they're learning, and if they're not in charge of delivering a good experience, you're out of business in no time, period.
How do you think a community can help drive business goals?
Well, I mean, every business, the number one goal is drive revenue. If that hasn't been obviously answered in what I've said so far, then I can like try to make it a little bit more obvious. When you are building a new product, typically what founders do is they build a product because it solves a problem that they themselves have dealt with, or they have such a grand insight about a market that they're like, this product's going to change the world and it's going to solve this problem or these problems for this audience. And then they bring it to market, and now it's their job to go and find people to buy it. So that's where they start doing sales and marketing. That's what we learned in business school. That doesn't work anymore. Now, no one gives a shit about what you built. They just care about themselves. And goddamn, is it hard to build a new product and raise money for it if you're going that route, and then try to find people to buy it. So maybe don't do that. Maybe take the opposite approach, which is I'm going to go gather a bunch of people and I'm going to make them freaking fall in love with me. Everything I put out, everything I do, everything I say, everything I wear, they're obsessed with. And it's not about me as a person. It's about the values and the culture of the community that we're building, right? Maybe that's 50 people or 100 people or 1,000 people. But now they wake up every day and live, eat, breathe, and die with this community, with the vision, with the values. It's their entire belief system in a sense. Now, every product that I launch, they're going to buy all of them. I can sell them socks. I can sell them an online course. I can write a book. I can charge them money to come to dinner. I can host retreats on the weekends and they'll show up. Like, community first, product second. You already have your built-in distribution network when the community comes first. And so when it comes to like reaching business goals, it's like, who are you going to sell to? Who's your market? You're going to go build your community after the product was built since you drained all your money in it. Like, you don't even know what needed to be built, really. You haven't tested on anybody yet. Who are you going to go test it on? Beta testers that you're going to recruit on LinkedIn who don't give a shit about you? Like, no. It just doesn't work anymore. So create something that helps people because they care about themselves, like genuinely provide value, connect them with each other. They come together over shared values, over shared problems, over shared anxieties, over shared desires. Now you can solve their problems in so many ways, and that's sales number one. I'll stop there because I think like anything else beyond that those are the business goals, I think are pretty damn obvious.
For me, it still sounds more straightforward that if you do a bunch of marketing, like marketing works with people brain, it makes people buy things and stuff. If you hire like a sales team who do the cold calls and this cold outreach, and then out of 1,000 people, maybe 10 people will buy. So that's how it was before. And that's how many companies and even successful companies are built. So why not to just go the same route? Why to build a community? Yeah, and one more thing, community, it's a much longer game. So you can't have community in like week or months. So you need to constantly build it. Why not to just go with marketing and sales?
Well, it is still marketing and sales. It's just a slightly different style. So I'll give two examples here. You tell me which one you'd buy. So if I say, hey, Yurii, I'm Jake. I have a new SaaS product that will help you submit your expenses faster. Can I take 10 minutes of your time and give you a demo? Are you interested in hearing what I have to sell to you? That's option A. Option B is, hey, Yurii, I'm Jake. I'm bringing together 100 founders who are struggling with their expenses and payroll management, and we're doing a hiking trip this weekend. We're going to get to know each other. And we also have a guest speaker who's coming, who's like the head of compliance at this huge accounting firm. And they're going to share with us along the way all kinds of really valuable information about how you can address the upcoming tax code changes when it comes to running your payroll every quarter or every month. We have a slot open. Would you like to join? It's this Saturday.
Yeah, it's like an obvious choice. Definitely.
Now we have the meeting, right? I'm not getting the meeting with the first pitch. That's what your sales team's doing. If I hire a salesperson who goes that route, I'm firing them immediately. Option A. Option B, I don't want a salesperson doing that. I don't want a salesperson trying to invite somebody on our upcoming hiking trip. I want a community person doing that. Now, if I'm there as the founder, if anybody on your team is there, getting to know all these people, providing them with a great day, don't you think they're going to have a little more affinity for my brand after that than prior? That if I'm just out there cold DMing them or cold emailing them to sell them something. So I think that's a really crucial shift worth making.
You also mentioned that the head of community or head of network, as you call them, who you're hiring is one of the most important hires for you at the moment. And that is the person who will be caring after your baby. So I feel like usually those people are like CEOs or something like that. So tell me why the head of community is so much important person to you.
So it might be important first for me to like define what my company does, because we're taking a little bit of a unique play here. We're a content studio for founders and VCs in the tech space. So we have about 25 clients this year. We started about a year and a half ago. For every client, we produce their podcast. We distribute and edit and distribute all their content, and they don't have to do anything. They basically just show up, record a podcast episode for an hour a week, and then we do everything else. We book their guests, we do all the editing, we do all the distribution and posting for them. And so we're like the producer behind it. We're also then the social media agency essentially behind it as well. So what I noticed kind of backed into this not too long ago was okay, we just did 25 shows this year. We have a CRM of like 1,000 guests, people who have been invited or have actually been on all of our clients' shows. And on one hand, these guests are very senior, very executive, sometimes celebrity type influential people. On one hand, a lot of them become my clients, or they refer me new clients. And so we're completely missing the mark if we're not giving the guests of all of our shows an incredible experience. Now, that's one piece. The next, like our head of network, their main role is to book great guests on all of our shows, because we want to book great guests for all of our clients. Like if we're booking them mediocre guests on all their shows, then the content, all of it doesn't really go anywhere, and we end up losing the client after a little while. So I'm like, okay, this person is in part a booking agent, part community builder, part salesperson in a sense. They're not closing the deals. They're just like starting to fill the funnel constantly for us. So that's why it's such a crucial hire, because right now the flywheel's spinning. We're getting referrals. And I mean, we grew from 1 show to 8 shows in 6 months. And then the next 6 months, we grew from 8 to 25. So like the flywheel clearly is spinning, and that hockey stick, like exponential growth is there. So now I have to think long-term. I'm like, okay, my vision is to build the first Hollywood studio, quote unquote, in the startup scene, period. Well, Hollywood studios, they call themselves networks, NBC, ABC, Fox, like they're all like the network. And that's what we have in the US. And so I'm thinking, okay, we need to have a very robust supply and demand list of like, here are all of our clients. And then here's the 100x size list of all of the guests that we can get on their shows. So if a client comes to us and is like, I want to launch a podcast, let's start with 20 episodes because I want to use it to grow revenue and like raise more money and hire better talent. How can you help me book guests that are going to help me achieve those goals? I'm like, let's look at let's look at the network. We got lots of people, and we're constantly growing it. Every time we enter a new industry or a new space, we're like, let's collect the top 50 most influential people in that space, niche technical spaces. Like the more niche, the better. Add them to the CRM, invite them on these shows. And now, by the way, these are people, if they're on a podcast, they probably want to be on more podcasts. Like everyone's trying to promote what they're doing now. So we're like, hey, you did a great job on this client show. We've got 3 other shows that are kind of similar. Do you want to be on these ones as well? It's all free to you, but we need to cultivate them with each other. This is building out a world, a network / community of people who are highly successful, motivated, that care about building their personal brand and their thought leadership. And we want to bring them great opportunities to do that.
What metrics of a community are the most important from a business growth perspective?
I think number 1 is K factor, which is the number of people that every member refers to you. So like on average, if you bring in a member, they are probably going to refer 2 more members or 3 more members. Like that's the number you need to pay attention to. If that is less than 1, if that number is less than 1, you're not there. That number has to be greater than 1. It's really hard to get there, but I would be laser focused. Like that's the only thing that I would really be tracking for a while is what do we need to do to get every member to bring at least 1 more member, 2 more members. And part of it is you need to have a very valuable offering to the point where they're like, my life has changed since I joined this community. And they go to their friends like, you want to come too? You got to come to this. You're going to love it. But also you need to give them the resources to make that really easy. Give them a t-shirt to wear to the grocery store or to their friend's house on Sunday, so that their friend is like, what's that? That's a really cool shirt. And now it's like, oh, this is the community that I joined. You got to check it out. Give them like something to spark the conversation. Give them a referral discount code, like incentivize them to do it. Give them sound bites where it's like, hey, you shouldn't even need to tell them, but ask them, how would you describe this community to your friends? And if they don't have a good answer, you have a problem. Like you need to give people your 1-pager, basically your sell sheet, your materials to go sell on behalf of you. That's your marketing team.
So it's a referral rate, basically.
It's the referral rate, but let's just call it that.
What more metrics do you have in mind?
I care about like daily or weekly or monthly active usage. I've seen a lot of communities pop up that are like really active for a month and then they're not. And like, you tell me, does that sound like a healthy community to you? I don't think so. That's a fad. But maybe that was the goal. Maybe it was like, we just want to bring people together for a weekend and like see what happens. But I care a lot about like, is the usage going up over time? Is it going down over time as there's more growth? There's an interesting dilemma that takes place in a lot of communities, which is like the critical mass. Like, the value in so many communities is that they're small. Like, is the fact that I can have one-on-one FaceTime with so many people. Like, think about it. Would you rather sit at a dinner with 3 people, 12 people, or 150 people, or 1,000 people? Like, probably 12. Maybe the 100, depending on your goals. But like, once there's too many, the quality of each interaction goes down. So now you need to start figuring out ways to like create cohorts within the community and like slice and dice it. Like, we have every quarter we bring in like a new cohort and they work with each other. And then once a year, there's like the massive community offering. Like, you need to kind of get clever that way. Those are pretty easy things to figure out. But as the size of the community grows, what's happening to your net promoter score? What's happening to your daily usage and engagement? I'd care a lot about that. And then, yeah, NPS, like net promoter score, I would certainly track that over, quarter to quarter, every 6 months, once a year. That's a big one to track. Those are your North Stars. Those are your main KPIs. Once you start getting into like, obviously, number of members, right? Like, that's like the obvious one. But once you start getting obsessive over like, we need to grow by 50% number of members every quarter, or like, we need to double our revenue as within the next 6 months through this community. It's like, you're focusing yourself on the obvious things that will happen if you focus on the more important pieces. Like, focus on value, focus on referral rate, focus on like ease of referral. If you do all of those things really well, then obviously it's going to grow. It's guaranteed.
Are there any more metrics that come into your mind right now?
No, those are the ones that matter.
Got it. And one more follow-up question. Like, how do you measure engagement? Like, what does it mean to you, active community?
Yeah. A lot of communities now are run virtually, meaning there's like a Slack channel or WhatsApp group or Discord or Circle or whatever. So I think there's some built-in metrics in all those platforms. I've used all of them, but I don't actively use all of them. Slack is my favorite. But there are metrics you can get in analytics on like how often, like your average daily active usage rate, like what percentage of your members are engaging every day, every week, every month. Is that growing over time? Is that going down over time? So like, I would look at that. I'd look at like, when you post, I care a lot about, I do this a lot personally. Like, I'll post maybe once a week or twice a week, like an announcement to the community. How much engagement am I getting on that post? Because if that's going down over time, that's not great. Clearly it means like something's not valuable enough to people. That should be going up over time. Whether it's me or somebody else on the team who's making the announcement, that doesn't really matter. But it's like, if we're announcing a big update to our community, we want them to listen and pay attention. And oftentimes, almost every time, it's valuable to them. Like, hey, we just did this, like, launch this new feature for you. Hey, we're hosting this event for you. Like, I care a lot about that. Those are probably the 2 main places I would look. And then, of course, referral rate. Like, is the rate going up over time or not? That's pretty indicative of active use.
Jake, I wish to have the sky's the limit, but time is the limit to our conversation. So the final question, what is one thing to do right away for someone who is thinking about building a community for their business?
Just host an event like this weekend, like a 1 day, 1 night. Like, it's the easiest place to start. And it is so high leverage. And do an event that is authentic to you and your brand. Maybe it's a dinner party. Maybe it's a run event. Like, just go for a run with 5 people or 50 people in the community. Maybe it's a pickleball tournament. Maybe it's a movie night. Maybe it's like, we're going to go see this Broadway show. Like, whatever it is that makes sense for the brand, maybe, and it should be fun and just enjoyable and like a cool thing to do. Just bring people together and ask a lot of questions. What brought you here? What are you struggling with right now? What's the biggest thing on your mind these days? What's keeping you up at night? How can we be more valuable to you? Do you have any feedback for us? Who are you looking to connect with these days? take note of all of those answers. Now that alone right there will very clearly give you your next 6-month roadmap and inform what the next event should be, and start to kind of develop the flywheel. What you want to have happen at the end of that event is people are like, man, I haven't had this much fun in a while. Like, when's the next one? If you're not getting that, the event wasn't good enough. You'll get it. It's pretty easy to get there. Just host an event. And if you like really can't stomach the thought of hosting an event, well, then maybe starting to surround yourself with a head of community is a good idea. Community events, like, they're kind of synonymous. Like, you need to have events taking place. This is what it is.
Is there a question I should have asked you but didn't?
I love that. I think it's important to ask or understand. Well, I guess I'll put it into your words. Like, what would the question be? Like, Jake, what types of companies would and would not benefit from building a community, and why? That's the question I think should be asked.
We still have time. So, Jake, I just want to ask you this question. Yeah. What companies won't benefit from having a community?
Oh God, dude, good question.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking a lot. Yeah,
I think just about every single company can benefit from it. I'm struggling to think of some that aren't. Like, for example, we're starting with a company pretty soon that's a biotech company. Granted, our approach is like content, like build podcasts for companies, and then they can use that content to start to find the people to bring into their community. So it's always embedded. And I'm like, all right, biotech, like, really interesting. So one of the first questions I asked this company was like, with the people that you're trying to reach, and in their case, it's like directors of large hospital groups and healthcare organizations, they want to sell them a new type of technology to use at their hospitals. Like, the people that you're trying to sell to, do they look up to other people in particular within the industry? And they're like, well, yes, of course. If they have a lot of desire to get a promotion in their career, and in the health space, it moves a lot slower. Like, it might be like 40 years to work your way up to CEO. In the tech world, that could be 8 years or 12 years. So they're like, everyone's very motivated by long-term career mobility. So when they see somebody that's in the role that they want in 20 years and they write a book, they read the book. If they have an email newsletter, they all follow it. And there's only like a few dozen people in the space, if that are like at that level of seniority, but everyone wants to be them one day. And I'm like, great. Those are all the podcast guests. Because now all the people the 1,000 people that are below them who want to be them one day are going to tune in to listen to those people. Easy. But it's the same formula for community. It's like, invite 1,000 people in to a dinner. 100 of them will show up. It has to be in person. Don't try to do a freaking virtual dinner. Like a banquet style, maybe 100 people, and have a guest speaker. And it's one of those top tier executives. Maybe pay them a couple bucks to be there, whatever. Like, community in biotech, right? Like, no one thinks of that in that space much. So the formula, the ethos works in every single industry, I think, for the most part. I can't think of any yet where it doesn't work. And then the sky's your limit for sure on how you can implement your own flavor into it.
I also feel like if your product or business is connected with people, yeah, most likely you'll have a community. But also it depends on how much, what is the scale of what you are doing. For example, if you are selling the ice cream on the beach for a few months when it's a warm temperature, if you are in the place that have seasons, maybe you don't have to build a community around that. But if you are building like a net of ice cream shops all over the world, most likely, yeah, it's a good idea to go for it.
I mean, I'll tell you what, that I live in Los Angeles by the beach, and there's a community that just popped up recently called Coffee and Chill. On Sunday mornings, they just pop up cold plunges, like ice baths, in someone's yard, and now they have like cooler spaces. But in this beginning, it was like they would just find a friend who has a cool yard and be like, Sunday morning, 500 people show up and just like do a cold plunge, and then they have a local coffee shop sponsor it and make coffee. So it's like, drink coffee and cold plunge at 10 a.m. on a Sunday. It's like the last time of the week that you'd want to go be social
Hmm.
and cold plunge. But it's interesting because that's it. That's the company. They just do Sunday morning cold plunges and coffee. But every week now they're making good money and they've got an incredible TikTok and Instagram presence. And now they're starting to sell merch and now they're doing collaborations with
Hmm.
streetwear brands and other local companies. Now they did one at a gym recently and like now you're seeing coffee and chill everywhere. And these are just like some 25, I think, kids in Venice, California that like
Wow.
started this thing. Um, but what's happening is people are showing up and they're basically raising their hand and saying, I'm someone who does this. Like I'm someone who values health and wellness and like putting myself in challenging positions and I'm lonely at that. My
Hmm.
roommates don't get it. My ex-girlfriend or boyfriend didn't get it. So I want to meet other people who get it. And like if that's on a Sunday morning, then hell yeah. Now, for them to bring in the guy or gal who sells ice cream on a hot day at the beach to sell their ice cream at that event and collaborate a little bit, that's like the coolest thing ever. It's just authentic, it's local, it's real, it's great.
No,
And
Jake.
like we're seeing really cool brands we're just starting to see really cool brands do this. And we're really just starting to see cool B2B brands do this. Like, don't just do another meetup. Oh, like a blockchain
Uh,
meetup or like a crypto meetup or whatever. Like, you're just meeting in some like weird hotel lobby to talk about crypto for an hour or two, and then like everyone shows up with their backpack and they go home. Like, okay, cool. That's not cool. Like, that's not that hot and sexy and badass. Like, make this thing freaking sweet. Like, bring in a coffee vendor. Do a pickleball tournament. Do cold plunges. Like, get uncomfortable and weird with people. It's a strange example, but Fire Festival. Um, One of their takes was the best way to build relationships with people is to do really scary things together.
hmm.
And so Billy McFarland used to bring like a celebrity and an investor and an athlete in an airplane together to go skydiving. And like while they're up in the air at 20,000 feet, he'd tell the pilot to turn off the engine and they'd start to go down. Now everyone's scared that they're going to die. Then the pilot would be like, haha, just kidding, turn it back on. And now these three people just had a traumatic experience together, the celebrity, the
I got
investor,
it.
and the athlete. And now they're like bonded friends for life. And that's what they're going to Fire Festival for. They're not asking Billy, hey, take me up in an airplane and like scare the shit out of me and kill me almost. But like now they're leaving with this new relationship that was formed over this incredible traumatic bond. Now, you don't have to like bring trauma into your experience
Hmm.
necessarily, but you can't just put people in a room at a sweaty hotel and be like, we're building community. They're going to be best friends now. They're going to be the most important relationships in each other's lives. No, you have to manufacture some sort of event that like creates that allure.
It's a new level. I've never heard about this, but I feel like I will maybe try someday to build a community in a way that driving like flying on a plane and then turn the engine off. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll see. I will one day I will share this experience with you too. And last but not least, name two people I should reach out to talk about community ROI.
I have a friend named Emily Chertow. She was the head of community at Day One for a little while, which is the company that I was the CMO for a few years ago. And now she full time hosts journaling classes in person and a few virtual, um, mostly in New York and Los Angeles. And I think she travels around to do it a bit. She's the best community builder I've ever met, and is just such an original, inspiring, cool person. Um, and to get like specific strategies from her uh, would be phenomenal. Her and I, she hosted a small dinner with like four people a few weeks ago, and the next morning I was so inspired. That's when I wrote that LinkedIn post that head of community will be the most important hire in the years to come. And I'm just like, Emily, you're gonna make so much freaking money one day. You're gonna be so goddamn successful when like the rest of the world finally picks up on what you've been putting down for the last decade. So, and it's going to happen. It's guaranteed. Emily would be a great person to have on the show or to talk to in general. The next is like the godfather of community, which is Greg Eisenberg. He's a lot more prolific, extremely successful entrepreneur. I'd say good luck in getting him on the show just because he's so famous, but like go for it. So if anybody's listening, he's one to follow online. His LinkedIn and Twitter presence is great and brilliant. And like if you want tactics and strategies on community building, but also just someone that like really gets it. If you haven't heard of Greg already, he's the guy. Last name is spelled Isenberg. Greg Eisenberg. Those are the two people.
Got it. And what is the best way to connect with you?
LinkedIn, that's my jam. Jake Hurwitz, Hurwitz, founder and CEO at Thursday Labs. I try to write a couple days a week on LinkedIn. It's funny that I run a podcast content studio, and over the last almost a year, I haven't had my own podcast, which is a little bit ironic.
One day, it's time to do it.
But we're launching it in probably in Q4. Last night, even I was up really late, like building out some initial strategy for it. I'm trying to make it very different and something that we can really run with for the long haul and not get redundant across every episode. But I run 25 shows. I just kind of like don't have the time to do my own, but now we have the team and the engine to do it. So I'm like, we're going to add one more show to the roster and it's going to be ours and it's going to be great. So I'd say keep an eye out for that if you're listening and it's still at the time that we haven't launched it. If we have launched it by the time you're listening, then check it out. I don't have a name for it yet, but it will be presented by Thursday Labs.
Got it, Jake. Thank you so much for this extremely valuable conversation and sharing your experience so openly.
Of course, my friend. Thank you for having me. I was really excited this morning to finally be a guest on a show again. I think it's been like 2 months since I've been a guest versus the producer. So this just made my day.
Got it. Thank you very much. And see you in the community business world. And thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions about how the community can help you reach and overcome your business goals faster, let's connect on LinkedIn and talk about it. That's it. We're done. See you in the next episode.